Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I am the actor.
My name is Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
Here we go, Josh. Here we go.
Okay, I didn't like it, and I want to talk about spoilers. So, what did you think about it?
Wait, are you kidding with me?
No,
Are you being for real?
I'm being for real.
I didn't either. There's some things. Wow, you just went for it. You made my heart race a little bit because I thought you were messing with me. Are you messing with me? Are you going to tell me like 10 minutes from now?
No, I don't like it. I don't like it. I didn't like the movie.
You want to tell people what we're talking about?
Joker. And we're not going to there's not going to be any preamble because a lot of the stuff I need to talk about is very spoiler heavy. And I've been trying to figure out a way to to describe why I'm not connecting with this movie, because I guess a lot of people really like it, and I've stayed away from any kind of think pieces and things like that. So I'm coming into this fairly raw, even though I saw it on open, like I saw it Thursday night at 7:15. I was like, it was like one of the first showings of the movie, and yeah, I mean, I got like, I don't know, 5-10 minutes into it, and I was like, this is not good. I've got another hour and 45 minutes of this. If you want to start with a positive, which I know you like to do, we both like to do that, but you are much better about keeping us on task with that. I think Joaquin Phoenix's performance was great, but it's hard for me to separate the character and how the film narrative was written from that. So, and Paul is dancing. So, but a little backstory. I said, like, this movie looks crazy. It looks really good. It looks, subversive and it's a thing. And we've even talked about it a little bit on the podcast. And Paul was like, "Meh, I don't want to watch it. I don't want to see it." And I pushed a little bit.
Okay, that's not true. And I appreciate the surfer dude.
You said, what's the point?
Yeah, no, I said I don't see the necessity of this film.
Yeah.
I never said I wasn't going to watch it. I wasn't turning off to it. I just didn't understand the necessity of this film. And side note, turns out I'm right. But let's jump back for just a split second. There's so many people out there who listen to the podcast who know I have got to be rightist. So they love when I get to actually say it, and I'm actually right. For us, between you and I am right. You want to say it one more time, Paul? Okay, so let's start with the positive. The positives are Joaquin Phoenix's performance is so crazy over the top. He's makes so many bold choices. And, I've talked about that as an actor. I've talked about performances that are like bold choices win with me every time. And he does things that I thought were brilliant, that I've seen in comic books, that I have never really seen articulated in movies, performance-wise, when it comes to the Joker, the whole dancing Joker thing, although not really explain why he does it. That Tai Chi dancing thing that he does
in the bathroom,
doesn't come from anywhere. They give no explanation why he reverts into that, which is problematic for the rest of the film for me. That is, in a nutshell, what the problem of the film is for me. But that said, I will give the film credit for completely shutting down anybody in the audience who might talk, who might get on their phone, who might be a crowd displeaser. No one said a word. They were stunned. And for that fact, it has to have some credit given to it. I don't know if it's that. And there were young people in front of me, young people behind me, young people all over the place. 8:00 on a Monday night. The theater was packed. And I was a little surprised about that, but not that surprised, because this has brought in a lot of money and it's caused a lot of stir. But they did not move. Nobody got on their phone. I was shocked because a young lady sat in front of me. She had her phone in her hand. She checked it once or twice. The movie started. She never checked it again. As a matter of fact, she kind of flipped it over and looked at it and then said, nope, because the movie did something to people. So on that level, it needs to be talked about as it's doing stuff to people. But unfortunately, my question never gets answered. What's the necessity of this film? For me, as a backstory to a Batman villain, it never gets answered. And I also give it credit for not making it as if the world doesn't exist, that they're in Gotham, but not really, that he's a villain of Batman, but not really, that there's another Bruce Wayne story going along at the time, but not really. I thought it was going to be subversive and an art house film, which it sort of tries to be, but I thought it was going to stray away from any of those storylines as if that world didn't really exist. And it doesn't. So to its credit, I thought that the way they, and we can get more into this, but the way they incorporated all of the other characters' backstories into this, the minimal amount of backstories of other people, that was interesting. It left me with, okay, they're still honoring this is a Batman villain. And we talked about this early on when this film was announced. You said, can you have a Joker, or you said, yeah, texted me, can you have a Joker movie without Batman? And I said, I don't see the necessity of it, but it's interesting that they're going to try to do that, but they really don't, because they're one and the same. And Todd Phillips doesn't stray away from that. So to his credit, he does a good job at incorporating those things. Some of the things that he chooses to do, I didn't particularly care for, but at least they're there. I also, since we're going to start with spoilers right away, I also think that credit has to be given to the fact that we have no idea what's real and what's not in this film. We have no idea. I actually think that's pretty clever. I was thinking about that today because I was thinking, well, Bruce Wayne's going to grow up knowing the Joker as Arthur Fleck, right? Arthur Fleck.
Yeah.
He's going to know that he's old enough to have remembered having an interaction with this guy who turns into the Joker. And even if he doesn't remember, Alfred will remember. So how is that incorporated into the Batman story later on? But really, honestly and truthfully, we have an unreliable narrator. So it could have happened. It could have not happened.
Yeah.
We don't know.
All bets
so anyway,
are off. Yeah. And I think that's okay. So I guess I'll say a little bit of a piece about it before we get into super heavy spoilers or specific spoilers. But I went into it. I don't know what I was expecting, but this is a movie, and I haven't. I guess is that how many superhero movies have been about a bad guy, have been about a villain, but I don't know how they couch that in Venom, how they deal with the issue in Venom of having your main character, who would normally in a movie be a protagonist, as the villain. You can't necessarily say that the protagonist there is a protagonist in this movie as far as like a positive driving force in the film. There is a force in the film, but it's not a positive force. It's a negative force, but it's also a force that, I mean, you're inherently talking about someone who has a mental issue, as a mental illness, and who grew up with a mother who has mental illness. And so these things have to be dealt with in the film, and they can either be dealt with sympathetically, or they can be just kind of brushed aside or coldly forgotten about. And everyone around him, with the exception of a few characters, everyone around him just kind of and there's the line in the film, he writes in a journal. He said the hardest part about having a mental illness is that people expect you to act like you don't. So that's a serious thing. That's a serious line. And so in the film, we're kind of like complicit in what's happening to him because we're watching it, or maybe it puts the audience in a difficult position. And it's not one of those movies. I just watched some of the special features for Midsommar and got like really excited about watching that film again. And that's a difficult movie, and that puts the audience in difficult positions. But it's a totally separate feeling for me than what this film's doing. It's putting the audience in this difficult position of identifying with the main character, but then also having to wrestle with what the main character does and determine who's at fault for what the main character does. And it asks a lot of questions and I don't think it gives a lot of specific answers. And films that do that can be challenging, but I don't know. I don't have a clear view or a clear concept of what the filmmakers are trying to push forward in this, and especially couching it into comic book based character who has multiple other versions. That is the part that multiple other versions that I've seen, or that other people have seen with different storylines. and with a particular backstory. This seems like it's trying to play on that in some ways, especially with how he looks in certain scenes. But then at the same time, it's trying to ask new questions or take a different tack with what the character is. So it's really confusing to me. The whole movie is really confusing. I don't know how they got from we're going to make a Joker movie to this thing. Usually there's enough there for me to go back and wrestle with it, but for this one I'm just not feeling it.
Okay, well, to go back to your point about Venom really quick, Venom has a precedence for being the protagonist in a comic book storyline. Okay, and he has antagonists that he fights against. Carnage is going to be the new villain in the new movie played by Woody Harrelson, and everybody's excited about it because, you know, it's like an anti-hero, if you will. They exist in film, and they are the most interesting heroes, in my opinion. The people who have flaws, the characters who have flaws, but still have something where making it right is the most important thing or the most important choice. Mm-hmm. Whether or not you eat people, whether or not you splatter people up against the wall, or whether or not you're infected by a microscopic black ooze from space that eats people and splatters people against the wall, deep down inside, Brock, I believe his name is, Tom Hardy's character, still wants to do the right thing because of the love of his life and the cliche story of losing. Boy finds girl, boy loses girl, boy finds girl again, the whole cliche story. So there is a precedence for it. And I'm not sure, it's funny because I don't know exactly how we're going to have a discussion, because everything you said so far, I agree with 100%. I just don't see, I'm probably going to repeat this to people, and people are going to get mad at me for saying it so often, but there's no necessity for this for me. There's no reason to give Joker a backstory like this. There's just no need. And I was sitting here thinking, when I was going to bed last night, I was like, why is this not settling right with me? Is it because I had some kind of preconceived notion that I wanted to be right about it? I wanted to come out of that film and go, it's brilliant. As a matter of fact, my brother and my niece, hi Jackie, she listens to the podcast, by the way, they were over the moon about it. They thought it was brilliant. They thought it was Oscar worthy. They just thought it was, the atmosphere was luscious and it was just chaos and all of this stuff. And I wanted to come out going, oh yeah, I see it. And I didn't. And I kept thinking to myself, and you had said once to me, I think even on podcasts, don't think about it as Joker, think about it as the clown. And I said, that's impossible for me because this is a DC comic character that has to have some foot in this world, and it has way more than one foot into this world. Yeah. It has a foot in the world. He is in this world. They make it very quick knowledge that you're in Gotham. They repeat it 1,000 times. Gotham kind of looks like it sort of has in past movies, but still looks more like New York in 1970. Got a little bit of an issue with that. So I kept saying to myself after the film, do I need to know? Spoilers, that he was adopted. There are things in his backstory. Do I need to know them to know how the Joker is as a person now? The answer is no. I don't need to know any of that stuff. As a matter of fact, the fact that we don't know these things about Heath Ledger's character, the fact that he doesn't have prints on file, the fact that they're handmade clothing, personally made clothing, one of a kind, the fact that he has no identifiable anything in the system makes him much more intriguing to me. And the fact that he tells different stories throughout the film about how he got the scars that he got makes it more interesting to me because it makes it maniacal and it makes it scary, and he's off-putting.
Doesn't it make it less human though?
Yeah, but that right there, let me be a little animated about it. That right there is why this film doesn't work for me. It never humanizes Arthur Fleck for me,
really?
Ever. Not for a
me,
split
I think it's,
second.
For me, I think that maybe we're talking about humanizing in a different way, but for me, he's such a real person because we see all of the things in the background that you wouldn't normally see. I'm used to seeing the Joker as just being this crazed, maniacally laughing person who has no care for humanity, who's just an anarchist, psychotic murderer. And that, I think, is the opposite of what this Arthur Fleck is. He's none of those things. Like, he literally just wants to make people laugh. Like, that's all he wants to do. He doesn't want to start a movement. He doesn't want to. He doesn't want to be in some kind of a role model for people. He doesn't want any of that. All he wants to do is just make people laugh, make people happy. As is evidenced by his profession, by his being a clown, and that he really likes that job, and he just can't fit in that, and nobody likes him, and ends up losing his job, and so that all there's no hope in this story. There's no hope in this story because of how mean society is, especially to him.
Okay, so according to Google, humanize is to make something friendlier to humans. This film does not. Humanizing makes things more civilized, refined, and understandable. It does not. You need to humanize characters when you're writing a story so people will understand them. To humanize is to make things more humane and easier for humans to relate to and appreciate. I don't think it does any of that. I don't feel like, maybe for a split crack second in the beginning, when all he wants to do is flip his sign around, maybe for a split second do I feel kind of, oh man, society's hardcore. But at the same time, it's such a cliche scene that we've seen a million times before that I can't really empathize with it. I can as a human, but it doesn't make me understand this character any better. And I don't necessarily need it to in order to understand the Joker. And not because I have a preconceived notion of what the Joker is, okay? Because I'm a Batman fan and have been for 40 plus years. It's not that. It's that there are certain characters that there is no reason to humanize them because they are just who they are and they just do what they do, and there's no reason to. And I'm not saying that you can't try to, but for me, this film never does that. It never gives me a reason to sympathize with him, because you keep saying, or you just said, you didn't keep saying, but you just said that all he wants to do is be a clown. Does he? Or is that something that's in his head because he's mentally ill?
No, all he wants to do is make people laugh. He wants to make people happy.
Then why? Okay, does he though? When you see that journal that he's obviously been writing in for a long period of time, there are some disturbing things in that journal.
After he doesn't get his medication. His medication gets taken away from him because of the budget cuts in the mental health funding, and he has no medication to help him regulate his. He has nothing to help. He has nobody to talk to about what he's thinking, about what's going on in his head. He has no medication to help him regulate that. Therefore, he ends up leaning into the feelings that are going on in his head, the emotions and the thoughts that are going on in his head, and he plows forward through a society that doesn't care about him and that doesn't.
So in other words, if we don't, I'm sorry to interrupt, if we don't take care of people like this, and I don't mean to sound sarcastic or harsh or anything, I'm saying sincerely, if we don't take care of people like this and we don't make sure that they have the funding to get their meds, they turn into the Joker.
Pretty reductive. So if that's what you think I'm saying, I mean, that's not what I'm saying. Is that's what was written. That's what's in the script. All I'm doing is telling you the plot of the movie. I'm not giving you a reading on the film. I'm just telling you that's what's in the plot. So to me, that's what I read from the movie. But everything I just said has no. I'm not taking a spin on that. I'm just telling you chronologically that is what's happening in the film. I'm not saying that it's because of budget cuts that Robert De Niro's character got shot in the face. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that there are contributing factors to how this film ends up. And that is one of the contributing factors that the screenwriter, who I think did Todd Phillips write this? Yeah, he did, like during the production.
Yeah, with somebody else too.
So that Todd Phillips and Scott Silver decided to put into their 2-hour-long movie. There's all kinds of stuff that they could have put in there. That's what they put in there. Multiple scenes with this lady from the mental health Department of Mental Health saying that she's got budget cuts and all that stuff. So that's obviously important to the screenwriters and important to the plot of the film, because if it wasn't, they wouldn't put it in there. So that's kind of where I was going with it.
Yeah, I don't mean to sound like I'm condemning what you're saying, and I'm just trying to understand it. Like, I understand what you're saying. You're saying that you just said what was in the script. But I'm trying to figure out what the movie's supposed to be telling us about this character by putting that into the script. That's what I was saying. I wasn't trying to simplify it to be a smartass about it. I was just trying to simplify it so I could understand it. Yeah, I have a natural condescending tone sometimes. And so it might have sounded like that. That's not the point. The point is that I don't understand the choices of why they put that stuff in the film to color the backstory of this character.
Hey, I've got something written down here that I wanted to bring up, and I think we're kind of like working our way around this. I think that this movie doesn't have enough genre filmmaking, because what we are expecting is a movie that is couched in genre. We're assuming that it's going to be a superhero movie, but let's say it's a horror movie, or let's say that it's a Western, or you can pick a genre, and genre filmmaking is something that's tried and true, and you have tropes that you use within the film that keep the audience on task and keep them engaged. But while you're doing that, you can also interweave in what you want to get through to the audience in a subtle way. And I don't feel like this film it's not taking advantage of the genre of a superhero movie. It's not taking advantage of the genre of an anti-hero movie. It's just kind of like a straight down the middle film about mental illness. And it happens to have violence, extreme violence at the end of the film that we know it's building up to, but it doesn't utilize. It's like it's got a tool belt, and it's not taking anything out of its tool belt. That's kind of that's been my feeling about the film, just as I've thought about it. And I think what you're kind of saying is like, yeah, ultimately there's no reason for this to be a Joker movie, because you've only seen Joker as a villain who doesn't have a backstory, and that works, right? Or I guess Killing Joke,
True.
He has a backstory, but still we get to see in Killing Joke, because I haven't read Killing Joke, but at Alamo before the movie, they kind of go through the plot of Killing Joke, because they assume that this is going to have a relationship to Killing Joke. So, but we go through how Joker thinks that every person is one day away from going crazy, or one day away from going mad, and one bad day makes you a psycho. And he tries to do that with Captain Gordon. Is it Lieutenant Gordon? I can't remember. What is it? Who is it? Police Commissioner Gordon. Got it. So I don't want to ruin it for anybody, but still, there's a reason. It's like something happened to him. Now he's doing it to somebody else. This movie doesn't have any of that. It has him feeling wronged, because he was wronged by Robert De Niro, and he seeks vengeance for that. Him being wronged by the guy who gave him the gun, he seeks vengeance for that. It's a true, like, kind of quid pro quo. Like, you did something bad to me, now I'm going to do something bad to you. The guys in the subway that kicked all this off, they did something bad to him, he's going to do something bad to them. But the scale of how he reacts is way over the top from in normal society. But he doesn't have that piece in his brain that tells him what is over the top and what isn't over the top. He doesn't have that governor that ramps him down, that keeps him from overreacting. In normal society, we know that there's things that you can and you can't do. If you get mad at somebody, you can yell at them from your car and say, "Why did you cut me off?" But you can't pull out a semi-automatic machine gun and, gun them down while driving down the road. You can't do that. Like, we know that, but someone who has a mental illness may not be able to compute that. And that's what we're seeing. So it's just hard for me to, I can't get behind Joker, and I can't, and I can feel sorry for him, but I can't root for him. So it's putting the audience in a weird position. It's unsettling, and not in a good way.
Well, let me clarify something. It's not that I have any expectations about prior history about the Joker. That's not my point. My point is that the history that they're setting up now doesn't do anything to make me understand this Joker any better. So it has nothing to do with any other Joker's backstories. I don't understand the choices that they made to create this character to become the Joker or who becomes the Joker. So it's not necessarily based on what I think the Joker should be. It's based on what the Joker is presented to be in this story. And nothing that they choose to do makes me understand, for better, for worse. I'm not saying I have to sympathize or empathize or even relate to what the Joker does. So I'm not asking to have some kind of character, an anti-hero or a character that I can relate to on any kind of level. I'm fine with a completely subversive character that I have nothing in relations to, following a narrative that it ends up with a purpose. And that's what brings me back to my main point about this film. It's a movie without a narrative and purpose for me. Taxi Driver, he ends up, his purpose is to try to shoot that guy to impress Jodie Foster, the young prostitute Iris in Taxi Driver. That's what he does. All of these anti-heroes, they have a purpose. The narrative has a purpose, an end to its means. And so for me, this film Joker has this, and let me just say this as a side note. I come from the theater where a lot of times, especially when you do a Chekhov play, and I did a take on a Chekhov play last year, where it's not necessarily about narrative or plot, it's about themes and character development. So I'm fine with that. But this movie is pushing this character along, and all of these events happen, but he is going from one event to the next. He's not causing those events to happen, or he's not steering his boat in one direction to make something happen. And if he is, then I missed it. So I never really believed in the beginning of the film that he just wanted to make people smile. That seemed odd to me. Is he a character who just wants to be happy, and society has knocked him around? When they start talking about these societal issues and these mental health issues in this film, they seem very broad stroke and very broad driven and drawn, is what I'm trying to say. So I can never really connect to going, man, I really feel bad for him that he's got his funding cut off, that he no longer has anybody who listens to him, or if she ever did listen to him. I was disconnected from it. And, Taxi Drive is the obvious comparison. I mean, it's obvious.
That and King of Comedy, yeah.
Yeah, and King of Comedy, yeah. Even though it's De Niro, it's obvious regardless of that. So I don't have a problem with Todd Phillips being influenced by Scorsese's films, but then when you see somebody create something out of imitation, it's usually done in their own style. So yes, they're pulling from something that influenced them, but they're doing it in their own style. And for me, this film just seems like he thinks that trashy looking Gotham has to have trash all over the streets, and there's a garbage shortage, and
there's giant rats,
killer rats. Yeah, giant rats. And I get all that, but it just seemed like it was supposed to look this way, so that's why it looked this way. It didn't have an imagination behind it, why he was influenced by Taxi Driver, and then he let that come through him and he put his own stamp on that. It's the same with the character. I never felt anything towards Arthur or his mother or anything, because it all seemed so over the top from the beginning that I couldn't attach myself to anything. And you mentioned Midsommar earlier. That's a prime example of there is nothing that I can relate to what that civilization puts people through. There's nothing I understand about that. But I was emotionally connected to it because of the backstory of the main character. So I had a vested interest because of what happened to her. And he sets that up in Midsommar immediately and knocks it out. And then you have that coloring the whole film from that point on. So whatever that film has, Joker does not.
Yeah, I think that film, going back to the whole genre thing, like that film, even though it's ostensibly like a breakup movie or some sort of kind of like a fantasy, really it's a genre picture. It's a folk horror movie. We kind of talked about it. It's Wicker Man, all of those things, kind of like small enclave of people, going in, a third party person going in and getting caught up in all of the craziness that's in this small, closed off community. So yeah, he uses all the tropes that the audience expects from folk horror movies, but then also adds in the flavor and the spice of a real relationship and a relationship that's coming to a head. So it's a lot more complex of a thing than just one of those two things, a relationship movie or a folk horror movie. So that's why it's like on the top of my list of movies this year still. So you thought that Arthur Fleck was Joker from the first frame of the movie. Is that what you're saying? You thought that he had a disdain for society and was a bad guy the first time you see him on screen?
No, I can't say that, but I don't think that I bought into he just wanted to make people happy. It in order for that to have worked for me, then there had to be a distinct break in character for me to have seen Arthur Fleck before the meds went away in his life and then after the meds. But he still had that laugh. He still had that uncomfortableness in society, that scene with the young kid on the bus.
I don't think that's going to fix, I don't think meds are going to fix that though. I mean, are going to fix the uncontrollable laughing, and I'm out of my depth. I don't live with anybody who's taking antidepressants. I haven't done that. I haven't taken antidepressants, so I don't know.
Let's take that factor out of it. Let's take regardless of whether or not he's on or off meds, let's take his disposition before and after, whenever he becomes so obsessed with how bad society is. Where's the before and after? If you're saying that in the beginning of the film that he was a happy-go-lucky guy who really just wanted to make people laugh, I didn't see any of that. I saw him.
I think the before and after is, the before is him getting beat up about the sign, and the after is him with the gun shooting the 3 douchey guys in the subway train. Like, that's the before and after.
Yeah. Okay. Which that scene kind of bothered me for a couple of different reasons. The before, your question was, did I think that he was the Joker at the beginning of the movie? Well, the answer kind of has to be yes, because he has this whole backstory that you find out that he's been abused since he was a kid. You find out that his mother's not telling him the truth. You find out all of these things. So those things have had to have had an effect on him up to this point. And so he's 35, 40 years old in this movie. And so he's had a whole life as an adult where these things, where he's not getting mail, he's coming home, same routine. First of all, the staircase alone would drive somebody into a psychotic breakdown if you had to walk up those staircases every day. It's just ridiculous. So he's obviously had burdens and is strapped with things in his life that have influenced his personality to the point where, yeah, maybe one day it just snaps and he allows that to be the prominent part of his personality or the prominent choices that he makes. But they're obviously there from the beginning because he grew up in this environment, in this city, in this world with his mother and her delusions and all that stuff. So he is affected. But it's an interesting question. Do I think he's the Joker from the beginning? I guess the answer is no and yes. No, I don't think he's the Joker from the beginning, but I do think he's prime candidate to become the Joker in the beginning of the film. I mean, it's clear that he has issues from the beginning of the movie. The way he's painting his face on in the beginning of the film is not a happy-go-lucky guy.
Yeah, but that's another before and after. He paints his face on in the beginning, and he's painting his face on, uses the same paint that he's always used. And then when he is getting ready for the show, for the Murray Franklin show, and he's painting his face, he's like licking the paint, and there's a stark difference between the beginning of the movie and the end when he paints his face, because he's licking the paint, and it's a definite advancement in the psychosis of the character from beginning to end. So I do see a difference. So the biggest question, I think, is what kind of agency does this character have in his development in his evolution from Arthur Fleck to Joker? So at the beginning of the film, we can both agree that he's Arthur Fleck, and at the end of the film, we can both agree that he is Joker. So how much control does he have over that transition? And I think the film, in speaking frankly about mental illness, is kind of saying he doesn't have much agency in that. Is saying that he will inevitably be Joker and he's just along for the ride and he can't change it. So it's hard to get really up in arms against. It's hard to root against. Like if you were watching a Batman movie where Batman is against Joker, it's hard to root against Joker if Joker didn't even want to be there. If Joker doesn't have any choice in the matter. I think I'm honing in on why I don't like this movie a lot more. Because this movie is pretty much telling us, like, you probably shouldn't be rooting against the Joker because he's a bad guy, because it's not his fault, because he has mental illness and he can't control it. So that's really weird for a DC movie to say.
Yeah, but it almost sounds like you're defending it in some kind of way. Because
I'm trying to figure out why they made it. Why did they spend $55 million on this movie? Why are they doing this? They gotta have a reason.
Pay me my fee.
No, I get it.
I told you so.
I know, I get it. But there's got to be a reason. Like Todd Phillips has made good movies.
Yeah, and I think that what they thought they produced and what they think it is something that I don't quite understand yet. I don't have enough knowledge about films other than what I've seen in my lifetime. But that's really not much. Meaning a knowledge of. I have a background in seeing a lot of movies. That's it. But I don't have a knowledge of what the intent of the screenwriter was for this film. What was the purpose of this movie? And I said it earlier. I hate to say it like this, but I keep thinking to myself, what if Paul Thomas Anderson made this film? What if Ari Aster made this film? What would this film look like if Scorsese did it? It feels like Todd Phillips had a lot of great ideas, but they don't feel his. They don't feel like, I don't see him in this film. I don't see a thumbprint. I see a movie that has all of these great ideas, and it's interesting to look at, and the cinematography is gross and interesting all at the same time in the best kind of way. And the soundtrack is eerie and captivating in the best kind of way, but it all seems like either we've seen it before or it's just I don't want to say imitation, because I can see where they were trying to do something out of the box with this. But it comes down to what we were saying before, that it adds nothing to me to understand the Joker in this way. Irregardless of him becoming a villain for Batman, it doesn't do anything to help me understand this character. Nothing in this film makes me understand this character better. So I don't know whose issue that is, but it does pose a lot of the questions that I have about this movie. Why did they make this choice? Why did they make that choice? It's almost like, I know this sounds terrible and I don't want to say it out loud, but my feeling is it almost sounds like they went with that soundtrack because it was eerie and very Gotham-like at night and very,
it's like a chamber orchestra
instead of
there's no brass in it at all. It's all strings.
And I get how somebody could think that was a really good choice, but I don't understand the choice. I don't understand why it's that. It didn't wash over me, meaning it just went through me and I didn't hear it, or it didn't invoke anything in me. I kept thinking to myself, this sounds like an art house film needed this eerie soundtrack, so they put it there instead of it being eerie and they needed it to invoke something in the audience watching it. That said, okay, and I'm not trying to save myself from putting my foot in it, but that said, maybe there's something I'm not understanding about this movie that it's hard pressed for me to say I want to see this film again, but I'm sure I'll see this movie again. I'm pretty sure I'll see it again. I'm just hoping that maybe a second or third time I'm going to understand the choices that they made, and it's going to open up to why they even bothered in the beginning.
All right, so let's quickly talk about the co-stars. This movie is really kind of like mostly Joaquin Phoenix's film. But let's talk about the Zazie Beetz character, Sophie.
She's great, by the way. Domino.
I knew what was happening with that character pretty early on. You can tell what's happening with that character, and really, I think it's the sense of lack of hope that's established in this film up to the point where you meet her. My initial reaction was like, "There's no way. There's no way this is real."
Well, I thought to myself, it must be a bleak world that they live in, that she has no instinct for this guy. How could she not know something is not right in this guy's world? How does she not have that instinct? Man, Gotham must really suck. It's the only time in the movie that it kind of made sense. But it's a red herring. And you find out very quickly they Fight Clubbed you. And that's fine. Yeah. I think it's clever. I don't have a problem with that. It intrigued me because I was like, and then the scene where he's in the apartment. Now that right there is probably the best scene in the movie.
I think it's low-hanging fruit. No, you didn't like it? I think it's all low-hanging fruit. Like, that's the payoff. So we have the setup, but it's just the whole setup seemed like, yeah, I get it. You're having little thing between each other at a diner and you're looking at a newsstand. I get it. Like, I feel like just let's skip to the end of this subplot because I know it's going to happen. And it's not because I'm some sort of genius. It's just that seemed like the
clearly you're not.
No, that seemed like the most logical step in the development of this character. And it just seemed, I don't know, it seemed overwrought.
And I don't disagree with anything that you said, but I will say that the way that's shot, the way he goes into her apartment and it's kind of just his dripping hair and you don't really see her, you just hear her. And then it's, even though you might know what the outcome is, it's still set up very suspenseful for the audience.
Yeah.
Because you're thinking, oh, he just needs to be hugged and he just needs to be with the woman that he's with and he's going to feel better and everything's going to feel better. The payoff doesn't matter to me. The whole way that that's shot, everything that's done has more life in it in that 5-minute sequence than the whole film does for me. And it's eerie and it's dark and I felt something for him for the first time in the film. And then when you find out, oh yeah, this is, not the way it is in his mind, then I felt bad for her. I felt scared for her to the point where even though his back is turned to her, you still think that she just doesn't recognize who he is. Oh, you got the wrong apartment. You still think once he turns around, she's going to go, oh, hey babe, what's up? I'm sorry you had a bad day. All's well in the world. Even though it doesn't pan out that way, I still felt more in that whole sequence than I did with anything. I didn't feel bad when he does what he does to his mother in the hospital. I didn't feel bad when Robert De Niro got shot. I did feel sympathetic to what's the British actor?
Yeah,
what's his
Lee
name?
Gill.
Yeah, who was great, by the way. I did feel sympathetic towards him when he was like, he couldn't step forward because he was so freaked out by it. He was worried that that was well done. So there are sparks of something going on in this film. It's just muddled down with complete unfocused narrative for me. There's no purpose for this character to go through what they go through. And I don't think it's a genre thing for me. I don't think it's an expectation thing for me. I think it's a narrative thing. There has to be a means to an end, even if he's an unreliable narrator or unreliable character, because I don't think he really narrates the film. But you are expecting one thing and then you get another. That's not the point. The point is that there has to be a means to an end. Did I know that he was going to go on the talk show and do what he did at the beginning of the film? No. But you have to feel a natural path towards that storyline. You have to feel that that's where this film is going. And for me, he's just a character floating through space who happens to bump into something and then he reacts to it, happens to bump into something and he reacts to it, regardless of his mental condition, his emotional state, his abusive state, or any of the above. For me, it goes back to what we've talked about already. There is not enough distinction between who he is in the beginning of the film and who he becomes at the end of the film when I find out his past, because there's no way. For me, a character could not be influenced by all the stuff that you find out. It just can't.
So it sounds like what you're saying is he's kind of like a Forrest Gump type of a character where he's moving through this world and things are happening to him and around him, and he just happens to be in very influential places at particular parts at particular times, and that's where we get to him being at the end on a hood of a car with people revering him. What about Robert De Niro? Anything about him? I mean, it's gimmick casting, and we knew it was gimmick casting from the beginning, but really it's not a 1-for-1. I don't really see a 1-for-1 comparison between Rupert Pupkin and Arthur Fleck, or the Joker, because the Rupert Pupkin character that he played in King of Comedy was someone who idolized and revered the Jerry Lewis character and wanted to be that, and felt like he had an inflated sense of his self and of his capabilities, and that's not what this Arthur character is feeling. It's a different
But that goes
thing.
back to my point.
Yeah.
There's no focus on the narrative there.
Yeah. You can't shove in this correlation of Arthur Fleck to Rupert Pupkin, even though by casting Robert De Niro, everyone's going to go there. And by casting Robert De Niro as the Jerry Lewis character in King of Comedy, everybody's going to go there. So it kind of does a disservice to the film, I think, by doing that. Because it's kind of trying to put people in a box, and then it doesn't.
But you have to know that reference. You have to know that reference. That reference falls flat if you don't know it.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
it
guess so.
doesn't. I mean,
Yeah, you're
people,
right.
I don't think people who, I don't think a lot of people have seen King of Comedy. I mean, a lot more people have seen it now because of the history of that filmmaker. And it's actually a very interesting film.
Mm-hmm.
But it goes back to my point about, you were talking about, did you think he was the Joker from the beginning of the film? I would not have thought that if you hadn't brought it up, first of all. So actually, it's a good question that you posed, because do I think he is the Joker, or potentially can be the Joker at the beginning of the film? That's the key question. Let's say that's the key question that the director and filmmaker and actor wanted to answer. Okay. So at the beginning of the film, all I want to do is make people smile and laugh. Then why is he not telling jokes at that point? Why is he not flipping through his book and saying, hey, what's Gary? Two guys walk across the street, but whatever it is, and be bad at it. He doesn't necessarily need to be good at it at that point. Why not show that? And then maybe the filmmakers assumed you would get that because the mother has that great line of, if you're going to be a comedian, don't you have to be funny? So obviously he's told jokes to her that are not funny, but there's no reference point to that. So that would point us in the direction of, he will eventually end up on this talk show. It's happenstance that he ends up on the talk show. They happen to see his stand-up routine. They happen to put it on the show. He does nothing to push that narrative in that direction, nor does it seem like his character wants that. His character only seems to want that because his mother watches that show, and it's not clear at all that he's obsessed, like in the King of Comedy. De Niro's character is obsessed with Jerry Lewis's character. It's not clear that that's what Arthur Fleck is going for. You're looking at me crazy.
Well, I think he understands why he's being asked on the show, because he knows that people are laughing at him and not at his jokes.
But he didn't make that a goal to get on that show.
No, it just
that
happened.
a
You're
point
right.
of-
Yeah, it just happened. That's why it's not a 1-for-1 with King of Comedy. Okay, so finally, I wanted to talk about.
All right, Paul, done with you.
Well, we've trod these boards
We're done with
many
you,
a
Paul.
day. So we
Only you, Josh.
we
Only you. You're the only person I don't get defensive about who does stuff like that to me. If you were anybody else, I'd be like, come on, Pinion.
The good thing is I can cut all this out. Okay, so I want to talk about the end of the movie, and do you feel like he just dreamed up all of this up to the point where he's in the white asylum, get up, and he's laughing, and the lady in the asylum is asking him, well, what's so funny? He's like, oh, you wouldn't get it. To me, the way that I got it, because we cut from him on top of him being lifted out of this crashed car, and then being put on top of this car, and being revered by this huge crowd around him. We were all wearing the Joker masks, and we cut straight from that to him laughing in this insane asylum. Is that supposed to be a jump in time where he's been, the riots are done and everything's calmed down and he's been taken to an insane asylum, to Arkham Asylum, I guess? Or is that supposed to mean, to me, what I felt like is that it meant that it was all in his head. He was just going through that in his head and laughing about this life that was lived inside of his head and not for real. So what did you feel about that? Did you read it as a jump in time in the real timeline of his real world, or did you think of it as like just it was all a dream?
Originally, I thought it was just a jump in time, that he was arrested at that scene and put into Arkham, and that he was now being interviewed to see his progress and all that stuff. And obviously the bloody footprints is that he
killed her,
took care of that woman.
Yeah.
It makes it a much more interesting film to believe it was all in his head.
No.
But there are not.
No.
What?
Because
okay,
it doesn't make, because then the Zazie Beetz character doesn't make sense. I got so ticked off because if he's telling a story in his head, why would there's a third party somewhere in there? And if he's telling a story inside of his head, he's like, did he fool himself? Did some other thing fool him into thinking that he was with Sophie? It doesn't make sense.
Well, you could say that about anything in the story, though. You could say that about Tyler Durden. I mean, people do it all the time.
No, but
what's the difference between that character? That's because she's pretty and you like her. That's why it makes you mad that you think that he just made her up in his head. He did good. He made up a really good one. See, there it is. But you could ask that about anybody. Then is his mother real? Is Robert De Niro's character real? Or
no,
Commissioner Gordon real?
But it is revealed that character isn't real. I mean, if the whole story is made up, it's like you've got a story inside of a story.
It's revealed that their interaction is not real. Not that she's not real.
That's true. She is real. But their interaction is not. But it doesn't. How does that work from a storytelling standpoint? If he's telling himself a story inside his head, who kept that from him? Like, there's a reveal that's happening in the film of she doesn't know him, and who's that reveal for? It's not for him because he already knows.
I think it's a moot point, though, dude. You could say that about anybody in his head. He has some kind of reference point, and then he Tyler Durden's it, and then he turns it into something that it's not. Right. So, for me personally, it makes it a much more interesting film because now all bets are off. He could totally turn out to be the Joker that we are used to.
Yeah.
Which I'm not saying is the point of the film, and it's not what I want, it's not what I expect, and it's not what I'm holding up to this film. I'm saying that for me to think about the film, the actual thought that he's made all this up in his head was much more interesting of an idea that I tossed and turned around in my head last night as I was going to sleep than the rest of the film was. For me.
Yeah.
That said, I keep making reference to Fight Club because there's an obvious reference to it. But everything in that movie up to the reveal is as interesting to me as the reveal. It's as interesting, everything that happens. And maybe because we've seen it before, but I've seen that whole like fictitious person in somebody's mind storyline many times. It's how you attach your own personal artistic view to that makes it interesting to me. And that's not here in this film. You know what I find interesting? Side note, I find interesting that we sound like we're heavily discussing / arguing about this film when we totally agree about this movie. Like, we sound like we're like making each other's points solid, but at the same time we're arguing against each other's point, which I guess in a way is credit to the film. I did read this one person that said that this film being divisive for the wrong reasons is the reason why he didn't like the film or she didn't like the film. But the fact that he thought that if Joker really existed, that we were divisive over his storyline would have thrilled him. And that to me was a way more interesting thought than anything that happened in this movie up to this point. I don't know. I need to talk with people about this movie. Yeah. I need to find out what people thought about it. I need to find out what people liked about it. For me personally, though, I don't want to be a snob about it, but it just seems like there's so many obvious choices that they made that I think that they just, I think they did. I think they did a disservice to this storyline when it was so obvious what they chose to do.
All right, last thing. Joaquin Phoenix, will he get an Academy Award nomination?
That seems to be the question everybody asks me. Well, I'll tell you this. My brother texted me, "Wow, brilliant." 2 words, "Wow, brilliant." And I thought, because he saw a screening of it early on. And I thought, okay, good. He said, 2 more words, OS.CAR, Oscar. And so I texted him back when I saw it. He actually texted me early in the morning. I was already asleep. He lives in Hawaii, so the time frame is different. He's 7 hours behind. So I was already asleep when he texted me. So what did you think? Question mark, question mark, question mark. Woke up this morning and I said, Joaquin Phoenix makes bold, solid choices, and you cannot argue his performance. It is something to be revered. It really is. As for Oscar, 1 word, no. I think I'm good one way or another. I'm going to go totally Gemini on this and take both sides of this coin. I'll be fine if he gets an Oscar nomination, but something tells me he won't. There is something undetermined in this film that I think is going to reflect on his performance.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that's fair. I'm not sure that that's right, but that has happened in the past.
Yeah,
so if he gets the nomination, I'll be fine with it. But if he doesn't, I will not be surprised.
Yeah, that's the next question is, can a performance in a movie it's not even underperforming. It's doing really well in the box office, but can
it's doing great.
Good performance in a bad movie win? And I don't know if there a precedent for that.
Marissa Tomei.
Oh, okay. See, I never saw that movie. Oh, wait. Oh, we're talking about My Cousin Vinny, right? I was thinking Mira Sorvino for Mighty Aphrodite.
Yeah, but that was nominated for a bunch of other nominations too. I think original screenplay. Yeah, and she's fantastic in that, and that's a great movie
Marissa
too.
Marissa Tomei's good in My Cousin Vinny. Yeah, but I've never seen the Mighty Aphrodite one. But still, yeah, okay, all right.
Yeah, no, there's tons of different things. I mean, Shelley Winters was nominated for the Poseidon Adventure, the original one, which I like that movie, but of course it's just a 70s disaster flick.
Sure.
I think Fred Astaire was nominated for Towering Inferno or some. There's a precedence for performances. Actually, I think it's much more interesting to have a performance stand out in a not good movie than it is the other way around. You know, a great performance in a great movie.
Sure.
I think it's much more interesting. Do I think that he could be a front runner for a nomination? Yes. 1, it's early on, and 2, this film it's just divisive, and not for the reasons why I think it should be divisive. It should be an argument about society. It should be an argument about
mental illness,
taking care of the underprivileged.
Yeah.
It should be a discussion about mental illness. It should be a discussion about adopting children. It should be a discussion about, can people take the law in their own hands? Because that's what Batman does. That should be the discussion. But I don't want to press the point too heavy, but when you have such cliche, stereotypical setups of bad people, like the 3 white Wall Street guys in the beginning, flicking French fries on a woman, when you have such bad setups for why society sucks, it's hard to empathize with that. Yes, what they were doing is awful, but how many millions of times have we seen these 3 guys doing this stuff in films? We've seen it a million times. So for me, just find a different way to tell that, because we know those 3 guys suck. As soon as we see them with their slick back hair and their Wall Street suits, we know they suck. We know it. It just would have been interesting to be on the side of doing the right thing, because those characters were drawn differently. Still bad people, but drawn differently. I don't know if I made that point clear. So the point was, can his performance be nominated in a film? People are loving this film. Critically, not as much as the audience. It's got like a 58% on Metacritic, and it's got like a 90% on Metacritic from viewers. Critics a lot of people have not liked this film. They don't get it. And so, yes, I think he could be nominated. I won't be surprised either way. I will be more surprised if he's nominated than not. Let's put it that way.
All right.
Let me just say this, though. He does put in the work. He does craft an original character that I've never seen before. And he makes choices that make me understand the Joker that I know in a better way. Like we talked about the Tai Chi dance thing and all that other stuff. It makes, I've never seen that. I've never seen the reason why the Joker does those weird kind of dancing things in his world. He does do that in almost all the versions, to a degree. So he does craft it, and the way that he handles the laugh, Joaquin Phoenix handles the laugh, and the way that they etch that in reality, I think that's great. So I think he puts in the work, and I think he needs to be given credit. It's everything around him that I have questions about.
I would agree with that. All right. Well, you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You can go to facebook.com/actorandengineer, and you can tweet us at actorengineer. We'll see you next time.